Welcome to The Explainer. You know, we all face these huge life-altering decisions. A career change, a move, a marriage. So how do we get them right? Well, today we're diving into a really powerful framework for making better choices when the stakes are at their absolute highest.
So to really get why our decision-making process matters so much, let's kick things off with a mistake from over 200 years ago, one that New York City is still living with today.
Okay, so picture this. We're in Manhattan, way back at the end of the 18th century. And right at its heart, there was this place called Collect Pond. Now, for generations, this huge 48-acre freshwater pond, it was the lifeblood of the city. People described it as this brilliant and animated scene. But then, things started to go wrong. Tanneries began dumping all their waste into the water, and pretty soon it became what people called a shocking hole. And by 1812, the city made this really fateful decision. They decided to just bury the pond entirely. But the new land, it was built on this rotting, unstable ground, and it wasn't long before it became the infamous Five-Point Slum. And here's the thing. The city had a really clear choice. On one hand, you had Pierre-Charles L'Enfant. Yeah, the same guy who designed Washington, D.C. And he proposed this grand urban park. The other option, fill the pond in and build on top of it. Well, they chose development. But that choice backfired, big time. The buried springs and all that unstable ground meant the new building started sinking and decaying almost immediately, basically creating the perfect conditions for a slum.
And this quote right here, it just nails the core problem with some decisions. They are irreversible. You know, a park could have been this amazing oasis for centuries, kind of like Central Park is today. But once you bury a pond, well, it never comes back. So the real takeaway here isn't just about one single bad decision. It was a complete failure of process, a failure of imagination, really. It was this disorganized muddle where nobody was thinking about the long-term consequences. And that led to a mistake that, honestly, the city is still paying for today.
You know, this whole story just makes you wonder, why are these big, far-sighted choices so incredibly hard to get right? Whether you're a city or just, us in our own lives.
Well, it turns out hard choices are hard for a handful of key reasons. First, they have tons of different variables. They force us to try and predict the future, which is, let's be honest, impossible. Our own goals often clash with each other, like you might want the thrill of moving to a new city and the comfort of staying home. But maybe the most important reason is that we're often totally blind to the best options, the ones we haven't even thought of yet, all because our own biases get in the way.
So the question is, how do we fight back against all that complexity? How do we start to map out the terrain of a decision so we can actually see all the angles? Okay, so the very first step, according to Johnson, is to get different minds around the table. And this isn't just about being fair or inclusive. It's a real strategic advantage. Diverse groups are just systematically smarter because they see the things the rest of us miss.
And this leads to this really fascinating idea called hidden profiles. See, in any group, there's some information that everybody knows. But the really crucial insights, they often come from the unshared stuff, the knowledge that maybe only one or two people have. So the whole goal of a good decision-making process is to mine for these hidden profiles, to dig up that vital information that no one else has.
All right, so once you've got your map of the terrain, what's next? Well, now you've got to explore it. You have to actually simulate the future and try to imagine the real-world consequences of your different choices.
You know, most of us, our go-to tool is a simple pro-con list, just like the one Charles Darwin made when he was trying to decide whether to get married. For the pros, he had things like a constant companion and children. And on the cons side, a terrible loss of time, anxiety, and, my personal favorite, less money for books.
But here's the big problem with the pro-con list. It totally locks you into a binary choice. It's either marry or don't, take the job or don't. And that framework makes you completely blind to a third or a fourth or even a fifth option that might actually be the best one of all.
A much more powerful tool is something called the premortem. It's this brilliantly simple exercise. Before you make the choice, you get your team together and you imagine it's a year from now, and the plan has been a complete, spectacular disaster. Then you work backwards and figure out all the reasons why it failed. This little trick bypasses our natural optimism and forces us to see the risks we'd probably ignore otherwise.
Now, if you want to see this kind of simulation in a high-stakes situation, just look at the decision to raid the compound in Abbottabad. The stakes couldn't have been higher, but the intel was super shaky. In fact, analysts were only about 50-50 on whether bin Laden was even there.
And this is where having a good process was absolutely critical. Instead of a simple raid or don't raid choice, the team generated and then simulated 4 completely distinct options. You had a massive bombing run, a drone strike, a joint attack with the Pakistanis, and that high-risk helicopter raid. By exploring each path like it was its own full story, with its own unique consequences, they could make a much more nuanced and well-informed decision.
So, okay, you've mapped your terrain, you've simulated the different futures, but now what? How do you actually make the choice? How do you weigh these different paths to make that final call?
And this is where Johnson brings in a kind of surprising tool: great novels. His argument is that they're the ultimate simulators for our personal decisions. I mean, think about it. By immersing ourselves in the lives of characters who are facing these tough choices, we get to rehearse our own responses and really clarify our own values, all without any of the real-world risk. It's through these stories that we figure out what truly matters to us.
So, really, it all boils down to this simple 3-part framework. First, you map your options by bringing in all those diverse perspectives to uncover the hidden profiles. Second, you predict the future by simulating multiple scenarios, not just a boring old pros-con list. And then finally, you decide by weighing all the possible outcomes against your core, deepest values. And that, right there, is precisely why this all matters. A structured process like this is what helps us get beyond that disorganized muddle that buried Collect Pond. It gives us the power to make choices that are clear, that are deliberate, and not just accidental and short-sighted.
So as we wrap this up, I want you to think about the big decisions that are on your horizon. Maybe it's about your career, your family, your community. Are you stuck in a simple pro-con list, or are you ready to map the terrain, simulate the futures, and see your choice with truly far-sighted eyes?